Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Leeming from the 1 Minute Preacher.
Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you. I'm Atheistic Snail, and I'm very interested in hearing the question that I, an atheist, must also answer.
Now, in my youth, I had dedicated my life to following Christ, and for the most part, I was fairly serious. Yet it was in my late 20s and early 30s when I went through a long period of seriously questioning and doubting my Christian faith, which ultimately resulted in me ditching God altogether and briefly becoming an atheist in my mid-30s. Now, when people find this out about me, they're generally interested in, well, how did that happen? Why would I become an atheist? And yet a few people, I think, ask the more interesting question: what made me come back?
And I would agree, Mark. That is actually the more interesting question. I can see a ton of reasons why people start doubting, and why for many of us those doubts eventually lead to deconversion. So I'm interested in the few like you who convert back. I'm not one of those people who's going to say that if you went back to your beliefs that you weren't an atheist. If you say that you didn't believe in God, I believe you. But as a current atheist, I'd really like to know what compelling evidence you found that overcame your skepticism and doubts.
And my response is quite simple. I began to question atheism with the same intensity and passion as I had with my Christian faith.
Well, this is off to a promising start. That's an excellent answer. We should all take long, hard looks at any of our beliefs and do our best to make sure that they are founded in solid evidence and reason. That's why I left the faith. That's how I do my job every day and study science. And it's sometimes why the answer to very frustrating questions is honestly, I don't know.
You see, here's the thing. After becoming an atheist, I quickly realized that both the belief in God and the belief that he doesn't exist, well, they both have their knowledge gaps, their ethical dilemmas, their moral catch-22s, which at the end of the day, they all require some sort of leap of faith.
Mark, you're losing me a little bit here, man. Atheism is just the answer to one question. It's got nothing to do with morals. Do you believe that a God or God exists? If the answer is yes, you're a theist or a deist. If no, you're an atheist. No faith required. Just a lack of belief. For many atheists, including me, we answer that question no, because the evidence for God's existence, well, doesn't really exist. Here, let me try to make my answer more clear. I'm going to steal a time-honored example. Think about the verdict in a murder trial in the United States. The accused murderer is declared guilty or not guilty. It isn't guilty or innocent. The prosecutor presents evidence that the accused did the murder. The jury looks at the evidence and they say guilty if they think the evidence is compelling, and not guilty if they think the evidence is not. They are not saying that the murderer is innocent. They are saying that the evidence presented doesn't prove that the person did the crime. I don't know how you looked at your atheism, but I looked at the evidence that I've been presented for God, and I'm saying that God is not guilty of existing. I don't find the evidence that I've been shown compelling. In fact, I haven't seen any evidence to prove any God's existence. That's why I'm an atheist. No faith required.
And this was very unsettling for me because I think, like the vast majority of atheists, especially your aggressive internet types, although I would have acknowledged that atheism didn't have all the answers, yet essentially all that did remain were a few T's that needed to be crossed and a few I's to be dotted. It was religion that had all the problems.
Wait, what? Of course atheism doesn't have all the answers. How did you define atheism? Are you lumping in other ideas with atheism? Like I said before, it's just the answer to one question. Do you believe a God or God exists? So what particular problems are you talking about that you think the answer to a single question should have solved?
I only thought that way because I had only seriously questioned my Christian faith. I had never put my atheism under the same intense scrutiny. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. Suppose a child is born with, say, cerebral palsy. The atheist would rightly ask, well, if the Christian God exists, who is supposed to be both good and loving, then answer that one, buddy. and it's an emotionally compelling argument with no easy rebuttals. All that I can say is that while I don't know the why, I do know, though, that from a biblical point of view, that God loves that child no less than a healthy one, that God doesn't have favorites, no preferences, there's no hierarchy. That girl is born in God's likeness and therefore has the same right to exist, to be protected and cared for as a healthy child. It's a Judeo-Christian belief in the sanctity of all human life. After all, Jesus said that how you treat the least is how you treat him.
You know, I used to love that section from the Bible too. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you visited me. From Matthew 25. They really are beautiful sentiments, aren't they? However, there's just a few little bitty problems. Or maybe some big ones. One of the earliest dates that experts give for the writings of Matthew is 70 CE, so long after Jesus died. So the odds on it actually being his exact words after a 30 to 40 year or longer game of phone tag are pretty small. Perhaps there was a preacher named Jesus and those sentiments were what he gave, but they probably aren't his actual words. Still, they make a good starting point for a moral discussion about right and wrong and community responsibility. But here's another problem. Even if there was a preacher who said those exact words, why should I take them as the final authority on anything? Oh, because it's God's words? Can you prove that Jesus was actually God and that those words were God's? Can you prove that the God of the Bible is good? That I should follow his words, that he is moral, rather than just asserting that he is moral. It's a little hard, isn't it? Especially when you start looking at it. Let's assume for the sake of discussion that the Bible is Jesus and God's words. How do I jive this beautiful good section in Matthew with the section in Matthew 5 where Jesus affirms the laws of Moses and the writings of the prophets? Many other people who read the Bible use that to allow themselves to justify discrimination against the LGBTQ plus crowd. Historically, Jesus' statements in the Bible have been used to justify slavery and other bigotry. So no, not all people have been treated equally in the Bible, and not all people have been treated equally by the followers of the Bible. Oh, and let's not forget that the so-called Judeo-Christian culture everyone was equal under God's law. Christianity has a pretty long and dark history of using the Bible and Jesus' death as an excuse to persecute the Jews. So if God really found all these people equal, how come he hasn't stopped that? Is he unable to stop it? Unwilling? Or maybe he just doesn't exist and these words were written by fallible human beings who are trying to find their way to a better community.
Now, obviously, many would consider that not to be a very satisfactory response. It doesn't answer what we would consider to be the most important question of why. As a result, many simply leave it at that and assume that atheism is a better alternative. However, you can't be intellectually honest and leave it at that. Because the suffering child, it's just not a moral dilemma for the Christian. I would argue that it's even more so for the atheist. For if the burden of proof is upon the Christian to prove that God can still exist in spite of the suffering child, then the burden of proof is upon the atheist to prove that that child has a right to exist, even if God doesn't exist.
Okay, so while that is a good moral question that I think that you're right, atheists and theists alike should think about, it's not actually about atheism, though. This is about ethics and moral philosophy.
Here's what I mean. If nature is all that there is, then what should become of that genetically defective child? How does nature treat genetically defective offspring? Does that child have the same right to exist, to be protected and cared for as a healthy child?
Yes, they have the right to exist and thrive. But again, that has nothing to do with my atheism. I'm answering that as a secular humanist. And while I will be honest that my deconversion did not massively shift my ethical and moral beliefs, it did cause me to look into the foundations of them. Instead of just taking positions that I had been taught were right because they were God's, I look into ethical and moral systems and examine them, and now work hard to challenge those ethics to keep them on a decent foundation that supports the human tribe as a whole and also supports and celebrates the individual. Where are you going with this, Mark?
Like Jesus, does Mother Nature say that how you treat the most vulnerable is how you treat her? Clearly, this isn't the case in the natural world. Nature operates on a completely different value system. Mother Nature has clear preferences: healthy offspring. Infanticide, the killing of genetically defective offspring, is widespread throughout nature. Birds toss out the weak from the nest to die. The runt in a litter of pigs is ignored until it starves to death. So if humans are but a mere extension of the natural world, then who says we are to operate on a completely different value system from nature's?
Nature doesn't operate on a value system at all. It is not a conscious entity. And we, humans, are the ones who get to decide the value system upon which our society chooses to act. Humans have evolved as an intelligent social species that values our friends and neighbors. And here's the really great thing. Our naturally selected for human brains allow us to fight back against our environment and the disease and hardships that have historically killed us, have killed the Down syndrome children and other disabled, those with weak immune systems, those with cancer and diabetes, all these things that we can treat and that we treat better every year. We've developed science, technology, medicines, and philosophies that allow us to do things that the people who wrote the Bible would look upon as miracles. So now we can protect the vulnerable among us and give them the chance to live full, rich lives, now more than at any time in our short history on this beautiful planet. And even better, we as a society are choosing to do so more and more. I think that our active choice as humans to take care of each other, to take care of this tribe we call humans on our planet, is amazing and inspiring. And I find it even more inspiring by people who do it because they believe it's right, rather than those who are commanded to do it by some dictator god. Now, Mark, you seem like a kind human being. I bet that you would take care of the less fortunate among us because you are morally principled, and that you would do it even if you had never heard of the concept of a god. But for some reason, you are choosing to give credit for your moral actions to an imaginary god instead of the person who actually did it. You.
Well, as I said at the beginning of this video, both the belief in God and the belief that he doesn't exist have their moral catch-22s, which at the end of the day require some sort of leap of faith.
Nope. Sorry. You didn't present evidence for an atheistic leap of faith. You didn't even really provide evidence against atheism. You tried flipping a moral argument back on atheists. Here's the thing. Even if I was a sociopath who said, yeah, go ahead and kill the diseased, that is still not evidence for God. The need for humans to actually develop and think about our morals and face these tough questions that you raised head on does not make God real. However, your failure to actually address the problem of evil, even when you raised it, makes me wonder if you faced it head on. If God is an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving, why are there children with disabilities born? If, as you claim, these children are in his likeness, okay, then why are they ever at risk of society injuring them, instead of society always and utterly protecting them? Shouldn't an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God be able to create humans with free will who also respect those lives and treat them well? Humans who protect the lives of all the disabled? The fact that historically these lives weren't and haven't been protected is a concern. The fact that we didn't medically have the ability to take care of them prior to the modern age suggests that either your God is incapable of protecting those lives, unwilling to protect those lives, or maybe he doesn't exist. Which is it? You are correct. More questions, especially ones you raise, they can be hard, especially when you can't fall back on simple answers in old books. when you have to face the fact that the world isn't perfect and that answers aren't easy and often are complicated. Humans are fallible, but we are living in the best time to be alive for a human in history. Even with all the struggle and strife in the modern world, we are doing so much better than our ancestors, even our immediate ones. We have a long way to go to improve, but we aren't going to get there if we don't continue to face these questions head on and work hard and together to answer them. Well, Mark, it's been really nice to meet you, and I would be interested in any response you have to my post. To any of my viewers who go on to see his channel and interact with Mark, I request that you respect him for his person, even when you challenge him on his ideas. People deserve respect, even when we are challenging ideas that are bad or thoughts that we disagree with. I want to give a shout out to the amazing Lavender Lady, who not only covers atheist topics, she also has a whole other channel on cooking foods that make me drool. Seriously, crew, check out the debunks, then slide over to her other channel for the food. Thank you all for watching and have a great weekend.